Abney Parks, The Toyshop at the End of the World by Captain Robert Brown. Illustrations by Juan Pablo Valencantos and Fuso. Prologue, Out of Time. Charlotte Cesar had waited for Calvin for 5 hours. Well, to be honest, Charlotte had waited for Calvin for 5 years, but it would be unfair for her to count that as she sat on the little round table in the dark corner of the noisy pub where she worked. Calvin had run into the pub in the early afternoon, while she was wiping down tables and preparing for the evening's commotion. The 25-year-old man, with messy, sandy blonde hair and deep brown eyes, was just 6 years older than she, and he stammered out something about, "When I've tested my latest project, we'll have plenty of time. We'll have all the time in the world." He had smiled handsomely and slyly in a way that implies he had a secret she could not guess. But she was confident she had guessed it. Charlotte was beautiful, and her parents had often said to her, "How long until that Calvin proposes? He's had years to make up his mind. I know you don't come from a family with money like he does, but if he's stuck around this long, surely he plans to propose." So Charlotte waited patiently for Calvin to arrive, while Calvin fumbled about his attic apartment. This apartment was really more of a lab with a bed. It was cluttered and dark, with various work tables around the room containing different experiments. Vials of fluid, sealed orbs of varying sizes filled with pink gas, a device like a typewriter with a viewing screen on top, and a variety of unfinished toys all cluttered the room in a haphazard way. Calvin was often cocky, but occasionally he was just excited. Today was one of those days. After 1,000 tests of individual parts and minor applications of his grandest theory, today he finally felt ready to test out the culmination of his plans. In the center of the room was a cabinet the size of a wardrobe. There was a door in the center of the cabinet, and the outside of the box was wrapped in a labyrinth of copper pipe. The copper pipe connected 8 glass orbs that were attached to the corners of the structure. They were filled with a pink gas. Unfortunately, many containers about the room also contained the same gas. Calvin looked at the clock. "Damn it, I'm late to meet Charlotte." But then he chuckled. "Well, I suppose that will be irrelevant in a moment." He stepped inside the cabinet, and as he shut himself in, he whispered to himself, "The magical disappearing cabinet of Dr. Calgary," he smiled. "What a fine adventure this will be. I'll nip out and be back early to meet her, with an amazing story to tell." And he thought of how patient and understanding Charlotte was with him. Inside the cabinet it was dark, and he felt around for the throw switch. "Well, here goes," he thought, and he pulled the lever. All at once, the orbs at the corners of the cabinet glowed pink, the color of the sky just before a storm. This Calvin had expected, but unbeknownst to Calvin, all the other orbs around the room were beginning to glow also. Calvin's ears popped painfully. He had a sensation of sudden acceleration he did not expect. The cabinet started shaking, so much that he had to brace himself against the walls to remain standing. Outside the cabinet, toys and half-made inventions were shaking and vibrating and dancing around the room, falling off tables and crashing to the floor. The orbs all grew brighter, and there was a blinding flash followed by a sucking sound. If you'd been watching from the street, staring up at the Victorian apartment building in the late afternoon, you would have seen the window grow brighter and brighter until you saw a huge flash, heard a crack, and then saw the entire 3rd floor of the building disappear completely. This severed 2 pigeons from the rooftop in half and sent others fearfully into flight. The remaining top of the building shivered a bit and then slowly crumbled in on itself. A little more than 200 years in the future, Calvin's cabinet reappeared. It reappeared 3 stories above the ground, and it ripped through the air at 100 miles per hour. This was not something Calvin anticipated when he designed the cabinet, and the result of it entering the air at this speed tore the wooden box instantly to pieces. A large chunk of cabinet struck him in the head and knocked him unconscious. Luckily, the air slowed his limp body considerably before he hit the ground. It's the only reason he survived the collision. Hours later, he lay, eyes closed, face down in hot sand. His back was hot. His armpits and between his legs felt wet and sticky. He was dizzy. Then he felt a kick in his side and heard a voice. "Wake up, you're not dead." Then another kick. "I said wake up." Calvin struggled to open his eyes. At first he saw nothing but the bright glow of a glaring yellow sky and white-hot sand. Then there were blurry shadows before him, and as they came into focus he saw gray and black uniforms. Around them, scattered in the sand, lay the contents of Calvin's apartment. A pair of shiny black boots stepped into his view, and their owner squatted down in front of him. He was an angry-looking military officer, in small, round sunglasses and wearing a uniform Calvin did not recognize. The officer held in his hand one of Calvin's thinking machine experiments. "Is this yours?" the officer asked. It was more of an accusation than a question. "Where did you get this?" "Well," said Calvin, finding it hard to speak, but still managing to sound cocky, "I invented it." "That's what I thought," the officer said with a frown. He stood and he motioned to his comrades. "To the change cage with him."